Hey guys, welcome to the Kim Iverson Show. So small businesses, as we know, are the backbone of the American economy, whether they be small mom and pop shops or franchises owned by people in our communities. But they've been increasingly dwindling because they're under attack by private equity firms who swoop in, purchase them, degrade the quality of products and services in order to make a profit. The businesses are often left bankrupt or dilapidated or even unsafe. Communities are left with fewer small businesses with owners who they know and love. The money then leaves the community to faceless Wall Street billionaires, and the overall percentages of small business owners in the entire country keeps dwindling year after year. Essentially, Americans are owning less, and they're telling us, don't worry, you'll be happy. Well, our guest tonight is Tiffany Cianci. Tiffany was a franchisee owner who fought back against the private equity firm who bought her franchise. And when she organized with fellow franchisees to protect their rights and to protect their businesses, the private equity firm spent millions upon millions of dollars, which was nothing to them, to smear her, try to ruin her reputation. And even at one point, they tried to get the court to order her into a forced abortion. Not kidding. Yeah. RFK Jr. called it the most egregious case of lawfare against a small business owner he's ever encountered. We're going to hear from Tiffany about what exactly happened to her. It's an important story because it's so extremely common, although most don't fight back. Most just end up being totally and completely dilapidated by these private equity firms, lose their businesses, they go bankrupt. And this is what's happening to our communities. It needs to be dealt with. Congress is bought off by these private equity firms, which is why nothing ever happens. And we just continue losing the fabric of our American communities, small businesses, the backbone of the economy, and it all just gets siphoned away to the billionaires, the faceless billionaires on Wall Street. So we're going to talk to Tiffany. Tiffany, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Horrifying story that you're going to tell us. So, and I've been listening to your story, research your story. I want to try to take this piece by piece so that everybody watching can fully understand the scope of it. This isn't just about you. Your story is terrible, but this is really, truly, this is the type of stuff that, when people, I know with yours, was it Blackstone? That was the one that was the private equity firm that came in and bought up your...
Ours was actually first the Perot family's private equity firm, and then it was handed off to Seidler Private Equity. Seidler Private Equity owns the Padres.
Okay.
A very large private equity firm that owns hundreds of businesses.
Okay. So there's, so people know in this country, everybody's kind of familiar with like BlackRock, for example, that has $10 trillion in asset management. BlackRock spun off from Blackstone, which is a private equity firm that also has about $1 trillion in assets. So people are aware of these private equity firms. They know that they're, for example, buying up homes and then putting them back on the market for rental, as a rental. So people who would otherwise be owning their homes are instead renters. They're turned into renters, which is totally antithetical to the American dream. But what your story showcases is what they're doing to business owners, the backbone of the American economy. So let's start off with what your business, what was your business? Or do you still have the business?
So I don't own that business anymore. They forced me out. They terminated my contract, but it was the Little Gym franchise. I taught babies music and gymnastics, especially special needs kids in my community. We served over 200 special needs children. I was literally teaching therapeutic exercise skills to babies. That's what I did. And I loved it.
So the franchise, you bought into the franchise. It's called the Little Gym franchise. And yes. You bought this thinking, okay, here's a brand name. People know this brand name. Franchises have, what sort of benefits is it to buying into a franchise?
Well, there's always a really good sales pitch that we have a guaranteed proven method. They say 50% of all restaurants fail in the first year, 35% of all small businesses fail in the first year. We have a proven track record. We have systems in place. It's just plug and play. You're going to make money on this business. That's the way they present it to you. You're not allowed to negotiate your contract with about 95% of franchises. So you get presented 350 pages and you sign. You can't negotiate any of the terms. Buried in there are a litany of clauses that are ever increasingly favoring franchisors over franchisees. And more than 60% of family-owned franchises have transferred into the hands of private equity just in the last 7 years. And so increasingly, those contracts are becoming more and more abusive, more and more favorable to the franchisor, and less in service of the franchisees. Where franchising used to be a really good on-ramp to the middle class. It used to be a great way for entrepreneurs to learn and get their foot in the door. Now it's just risky.
So basically what's happening is on the franchisee side, because I know that this private equity swooping in is happening also just with entire industries. They're not necessarily buying franchises, but they'll go in and they'll buy all of the same service, some sort of service provider in an entire community, and that are all mom and pop, like plumbers, right? And they'll buy up all the plumbing, all the
HVAC, plumbing, roofing. Yeah. They're buying it all,
and they turn it into this. They basically corporatize it, right? And it still looks like mom and pop shops, but actually they're all owned by the same big private equity firm, and that's been happening as well. But yours is a franchise. So franchise. Somebody starts a product, they start a business, it goes gangbusters. They are then presented with opportunities to franchise. Other people think, wow, this seems like a really great idea. In my community, I could start this franchise up, and it's all like a package deal. You get it. But yeah, you're right. You don't get to negotiate. Otherwise, you just start your own company on your own without the franchise, without the branding, without all the support that the franchise is supposed to be offering you, right?
Correct.
So when you bought into it, was it already owned by a private equity firm?
So no, when I bought in, our franchise had been family owned for 46 years. We were promised it would always stay family owned and operated. They said it was a labor of love for the owners and the founders. And I believe them. I believe them, and I still believe them. They never wanted to sell it. They were acquired in a hostile takeover after COVID. It was not, the founders did not want to sell to private equity.
Okay, so COVID hits, and COVID obviously, and I would imagine with the type of business you were doing, you're saying this is like gymnastics and music for little kids?
Yes.
Okay.
It decimated us.
Right. So how long were you locked down?
My county had the second largest closures for children's recreation in the United States, almost 17 and a half months.
Okay. So a year and a half, you could not operate.
Some of them, the Texas gyms were reopened in 2 months. But, if you were in Maryland or you were in Illinois or you were in California, we were closed. Some of them were closed almost 2 years.
Yeah.
And so the franchise suffered.
The franchise itself then suffered. COVID was, and this is what COVID did. COVID was just a giant wealth suck from the middle class to these businesses being shut down or acquired, bankruptcies, like all of this stuff. So when
Bobby had me on, he liked to use the statistic that in the 550 days of COVID, there were 556 new billionaires created. And we watched 30 million small businesses shut down.
Yeah. Okay. So the franchise got into trouble during COVID and they couldn't financially sustain. So they decided to.
My location survived. Okay. Lots of our locations survived, but the corporate office had done their best to help us survive by giving us breaks on royalties and telling us not to pay extra marketing fees. So they suffered. And what happened is a couple of their investors that had invested in the franchise got together and quietly sold their stakes together to the private equity firm, who they brought in as a marketing partner. And we watched in horror as live on camera on a system-wide call, we were informed they had fired our entire board of directors, our CEO, our CFO, our COO. All of the women on camera were crying. Their eyes were red. It was horrifying to watch. And that is how we learned our family-owned children's services business had been acquired by a private equity firm.
And this family didn't want to do this. This was a truly hostile takeover. A couple of their investors basically undermined them and was able to make this happen without. That's always the challenge with investors. And if they get together, they could stage a coup. And that's what it sounds like happened.
That one of the primary original founding people was a man named Randy McCoy. And there's actually a video circulating online right now of him writing a children's song, telling them, don't misrepresent me. I didn't leave your company because I wanted to. We left because we don't like what you're doing to children. And he made a kid's song about it in the only way he knows how. He wrote all our curriculum. And it is floating around on the internet right now, available to say what our founders felt when they were forced out of our company.
So explain that one more time. I'm sorry, I didn't quite.
So one of our earliest founding members was a man named Randy McCoy.
Yeah.
And he wrote all of the music for our programming. Amazing musician. And when he left, when he was squeezed out, They sent us all a message that said he wanted to spend more time with his family and his kids. And that's why he wasn't around anymore. And he released a song instead that said, "That's not why I'm not around anymore. Don't lie about me." And it was in children's format with a ukulele. It's ironic and awful, but it was the most Randy way he could have sent the message to all of us to say, don't you trust them anymore? I don't.
Okay. So the private equity firm comes in.
Yeah.
And so they're like, okay, we're here now. Now what? Like, what did they start doing? So
first, literally a week after they ended up on the scene, they said, we have new banking now. We need you all to sign a new ACH agreement for your royalties. We're going to send you some new documents just so we can handle basic finances. It's nothing's going to change about your situation. We just need these very innocuous documents. Well, most of these owners are former high school athletes. Most of them don't even have a college education. And they'd trusted our ownership forever. And they just started signing these documents. I went and looked online and looked up and found out that the prior franchises they had acquired were involved in class action lawsuits about these documents, the exact same documents, saying that they had sneaky, nefarious things hidden in there that would exploit the owners for more money and create less safety. And so I threw up a red flag and said, guys, we need lawyers. Don't just sign these things. We need lawyers. And at this point, I was the founder of our franchisee association. They looked to me. I was married to an attorney. I had a lot of legal experience. And I went and got my lawyer to come and look over the documents. And he came and gave us all some feedback and said, guys, these are not ACH agreements. These are changing the terms of your contracts that you have in place for the next 10 years. This allows them to take whatever amount of money they want out of your bank accounts anytime they want. They can charge you more money for these services. You're agreeing to do things that are not in your contracts. Do not sign these documents. And they have a track record of doing it and exploiting franchisees the second they come on board. And so I didn't sign it. But by the time we had raised the alarm, more than 80% of the franchisees had signed it the same day and sent it back. Yeah. Then came more contracts. The new contracts changed everything. The new
Let's just back up for a second with the ACH agreements. Yeah. When you did not sign those, you told the private equity firm, "I'm not signing these."
Correct.
What was their reaction?
I told them that they could redraft it to comport with the language of my franchise agreement, and I would happily sign it. But that it was an expansion of the terminology of my franchise agreement, and as a result, I could not sign it. They said, if you don't sign it, you can't pay your royalties. I said, I'll send you a check. I'm happy to send you a check. And they said, we can't accept checks anymore. We're not capable of accepting checks. I said, well, then you need to change it to comport with the language of my contract. They refused, so I started sending them checks, and they wouldn't cash them. They forced me into default.
How could they even say, we don't accept checks? Like, here you are paying them what you're supposed to pay them. And they're like, well, that's just not the form of payment that we're going to accept. And we're forcing you to sign an agreement in order to give us money.
Our contract allowed them to require electronic payment. But they weren't allowed to expand what they could use it for. It was only for royalties. The new contract they gave us was for vendors and marketing agreements and for customer refunds. And they could take anything they wanted at any time. And our original contract was royalties only. Yeah. And our former franchisor accepted checks. And so I did. I sent my checks and they wouldn't cash them.
So at this point, they're probably flagging you as hostile. They're like, all right, here's Tiffany. She's going to be a problem. She's actually reading these legal documents. Damn it. That's not what we thought she would do. So then what happened after that?
We got a second round of contracts they sent to us that significantly changed the documents. It became the new governing franchise agreement. And they told everyone they had to sign it no matter what, or they couldn't be a franchisor or a franchisee anymore. And that contract was central to all of the other litigations they were involved in because it significantly increased their power. It changed the new governing document of your agreement, even though you couldn't negotiate it. And it made it so that they could force you to use a call center now to talk about children. It forced you to pay commissions to the call center. It made you start paying like finder's fees. It took all of your communication with your customers out of your hands. It was this vast expansion. It was written incredibly nefariously so that it looked like you could opt out, but you couldn't. It was an opt-out that opted you in anyway. And when we refused to sign that, our lawyers came to everybody and said, you cannot sign this. It's creating centralized banking. We got together, 94% of the franchisees. We hired an attorney and we sent notice that we would not sign the agreements under any circumstances. And the day after they got that letter, they made an example of me and terminated my contract. The next
You were
day.
the leader of this organization.
I was the president of our union.
Okay, of the union. So they went after you. They
Correct.
saw that you were the person that was like shepherding and making it difficult for them.
Exactly.
So they terminate your contract. What does that mean exactly?
So it means that I no longer have permission to use the Little Gym brand. I no longer have permission to use their curriculum. Our arbitrator ruled they had no trade secrets, but it would have meant they couldn't use trade secrets. I couldn't use their trade secrets. But more than anything, it activated my non-compete clause, which meant that I couldn't work in gymnastics or with children for the next 2 years. It stopped my ability to make a living.
And you had, what about all the equipment or all the stuff like inside? So you couldn't use the sign anymore outside the building. All
Correct.
of that would have to go. What about all the equipment? Would you not be able to use any of the equipment either?
So I owned the equipment and I went and met with a company that was not considered a competitor of theirs and got licensed to teach kinder music. And they sued me for teaching kinder music. I had a right to dispose of the equipment if I wanted to, but only after removing the logos, which would have been fine. But they sued me in court and tied up all of the assets. So I wasn't allowed to do anything. Even when I moved to teaching music instead of gym, they sued me for that so that I couldn't work in that industry either, even though that's not what our non-compete clause said. They tried to expand it to working with children in any capacity. They spent millions of dollars making sure that everyone would know how far they could go to cut off my ability to make a living. They bribed my landlord $120,000 to evict me and not renew my lease
from the building.
Yeah. On 10 days notice, they wired him $120,000 cash.
Why, why were they retaliating so hard against you? I mean, they terminated the contract. They're done. They're done with you. You can't work with, you can't use their brand. They don't have to deal with you anymore. Like, why would they do this?
So one of the things they learned pretty early on at their other franchise litigations is that when the franchise association sticks together, they have immense power. And I was still the president of the franchisee association. And we were still fighting as a team, even after I was terminated. The franchise association lawyer was representing me, and everyone was pulling resources to help pay my legal fees. They wanted the association broken up fast. And to do so, they went to extreme lengths to make sure that there was infighting. They sent in spies to try to plant stories. They sent out a letter to all of our franchise association members saying I abused children. I abused my customers. I abused my employees. They sent 6 letters to the New York Times saying I was running a drug trafficking ring out of my baby gym. It's not an exaggeration. I ended up winning my defamation case against them for all of that. But in the midst of all of that, their lawyer was the one that sent these letters, their chief legal officer, a man named Stephen Polizzola. And because it came from a lawyer, many people in the association, not knowing what lawyers actually can and can't do, believed a lawyer couldn't lie to them. They believed that couldn't happen. So when these letters were circulated, it created immense infighting within our association. And people said, should we trust her? Is she actually abusing kids? Is she actually stealing money? Does she actually owe tens of thousands of dollars? All of that ended up being not true. I won the defamation case, but the association was destroyed.
Yeah, and that was the point, right? The point was they were trying to get all of the people that were with you to lose faith in you.
Correct.
They wanted them to look at, they're trying to say, well, this Tiffany woman, you shouldn't follow her. You shouldn't listen to her. She's abusive and doing drugs and stealing, like all these bad, terrible things. How long was that defamation case for? How long did you have to battle them before you won that?
Almost 2 years.
2 years.
Almost 2 years. And in the midst of it, what we saw was them acquiring more businesses following the exact same pattern. And when the association broke up, it broke up into 2 unions. And they sent letters threatening anybody that continued to support me. Their law firm sent letters to anyone that continued to support me. And at the same time, they started litigation with all of the new boards of directors. And so we were so much stronger when we were together, but they very successfully broke us apart. And as a result, they started winning all their cases. It was terrible.
Thank you so much for watching. This was just a clip from the longer, larger show that you can catch Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. That'll route you to the platform where you need to be in order to get the full uncensored show every Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Click on that link, watch the full interview. See you there.